Hey everyone, and welcome back to another industry report where we finally got our excuse, our jumping off point, to talk about Stadia. You see, a creative director at one of Google Stadia's studios caused a bit of a ruckus this week, even so much so that Google had to distance themselves from his comments and, well, seemingly ask him to clarify his Twitter bio, because it seems like what he said his job was isn't necessarily what his job actually is. So that's kind of embarrassing. Now, this fierce backlash did actually do something incredible, though. People remembered that Stadia exists. Now, the service is approaching its first birthday, and just before this, they had 3 days of announcements. Not that you would have noticed it. In fact, the amount of retweets, which were generally just ratioing this guy to hell, the amount of retweets garnered by this drama was more than Stadia's announcements, which is pretty embarrassing. So, we then have to ask, just what the hell is actually going on with Stadia? That's what today's video is. Also, Patreon. Hey, do you want some cool loot? Big old stack of loot. You get all this, and of course, it's Rogue Month, so you get the Rogue pin. Of course, that massively helps us out. You get cool stuff in return. It's allowed us to bring 2 more people onto the YouTube team, support an extra hire as well on our game development team, which is letting us move into 3D, and also increased compensation for everyone on the team. So, you guys are awesome. You help us out so much. Thank you. And let's go. All right, let's cover the drama. So, Alex Hutchinson, the creative lead at the Stadia-absorbed Typhoon Studios, started some Twitter drama. Now, his bio initially read that he was a creative director for Stadia, and this did cause some confusion as to how actually high up this guy was. Now, of course, he chose to do this roughly the same time that there was a big old wave of Twitch DMCAs over copyrighted music. And basically, he said that streamers should be more worried about playing the games that they're playing. He said that basically, playing games on Twitch is all gone as soon as the publishers decide to enforce their EULAs. Which, of course, is something that'll sound very funny to the publishers themselves, who often, do their marketing on Twitch with Twitch streamers and pay Twitch streamers to play their games, not the other way around. Now, he does believe that basically streamers should be licensing, their games, right? Licensing their games from the publishers for broadcast, as he says, like any real business, because they're, of course, profiting from what they're doing with that footage. It's a similar argument to, say, needing a license to play a radio or a license to play Spotify at your place of work, which it's barely enforced, but technically you sort of do need a license depending on where you are. And then, of course, it's the other thing where even technically, if it is the case that the law does support them, and in many cases it actually does, it is a little bit like the Napster situation where it's like, yeah, we see how you're right, but that doesn't matter because the wind is clearly blowing in this direction. Now, it's pretty mad for somebody at Stadia especially to say this because, of course, they're tied pretty heavily to YouTube gaming, right? They're all part of Google, and one of the stated goals and things about Stadia was, that it would have integration with streaming. So, it's weird. Now, to be fair to him, the legal framework does support for this stuff to happen, for music and movies, and publishers probably could step in and do this. I mean, I remember, say, the Total War games, you used to have to apply to get permission to actually use their content in certain ways. It was really ass backwards and stupid. But generally what's happened is that publishers have realized that's a really dumb idea and they've opened up their policies. So if publishers did do that, they did start trying to clamp down and get licensing fees from people, there'd obviously be a massive amount of backlash. Now that said, there is one difference between the music and movie side of things. You could argue that there's more of a fair use case. It's pretty hard to be transformative with music or movies when you're streaming, but for games, of course, it's the player's unique gameplay that can be kind of transformative. But, nevertheless, the industry is ran on the principle that game streaming is fine, even if it's the sort of thing where the EULAs that you sign up for say you can't stream or that they have the final say, even though the developers, on the other hand, may say, oh, yeah, do whatever you want. So there is a little bit there where legally they still have protected their rights in most cases. But yes, basically, it's very lucrative for everybody involved, and what Alex said is basically just really stupid and missing the point. I mean, streaming helps out game sales. Our World of Warcraft channel has got 38 million views over the last year. Now, if that helped to retain 25,000 World of Warcraft subscriptions for that year, then that would be supporting Blizzard $4.5 million in revenue. Of course, probably more because of further microtransactions, and probably more because we have an average, we have a sort of sustained viewership of, 200 to 300K. So it's supporting a lot more than that. But my point is pretty simple here. Stuff like that is clearly worth it for the publishers. Now that said, on the other side of things, there are short, narrative-driven indie games that often do have more of an argument that streaming doesn't help them that much. A good example is That Dragon Cancer. It got millions of views, but only 14,000 sales, according to the developer. Yeah, didn't really work out that well. Now, if you had a licensing situation there, it's like, how much would a small streamer be willing to pay to license a 4-hour indie experience? So yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's one we'll have data on soon because our studio is entirely based around single-player narrative games. So we'll report back to you when we start actually releasing content. That said, a lot of our stuff is extremely choice-based, so everyone's playthrough should be different enough, which you would think would mean that streaming would be an additive thing to our business model, but we'll just have to see. Now, publishers could gouge people for licenses, but I think my point here is they know they would be hurting themselves, and really, Alex's statements are just stupid when you actually bring them up pragmatically, and you think about this from a first principles perspective, where the overall goal is, for more of a market to be made so that growth can be produced. Growth for the content creators and growth for the publishers. Of course, another funny thing is that Alex's interesting history was brought up. He was the guy who was the creative director of Assassin's Creed 3, and around the same time he also accused game journos of subtle racism because, according to him, they showed a preference for storytelling in Japanese games, which he calls literally gibberish, and he talked about how he'd far rather play Gears of War than Bayonetta. So yes, he basically is a king of really bad, stupid takes, isn't he? Now it is funny that his bio has now changed to specify his role a bit more, and that Google themselves were actually forced to distance themselves from his comments, including one of the big higher-ups from YouTube Gaming. And what's, of course, hilarious is that this whole kerfuffle actually got more social engagement than Stadia's recent announcements. So, with that, let's actually talk about Stadia's recent announcements and what they've been doing, and just what the hell is actually going on with Stadia. The core is that Stadia has consistently struggled to make the most of its admittedly pretty cool technology. Now, the recent introduction of demos is one thing that's genuinely really good. So Stadia has released demos for Pac-Man Mega Tunnel Battle, Humankind, and Immortals Phoenix Rising. Now, each demo is available for 1 week free of charge, and it's available to new and existing Stadia users, and also does not require the Stadia Pro subscription or really a form of payment at all. You basically can just click the link and bam, you are playing the demo of a game near instantly. That is a great user experience, and that's the sort of thing that Stadia really needs to be doing. It needs to be doubling down on things like that instead of trying to emulate the traditional game purchase model via, well, how you purchase games in Stadia. Certainly though, being able to jump straight into a demo, that leverages the unique appeal of cloud gaming. Now that said, GeForce Now did offer something similar for press and media previews, so we should bring that up. And it's sort of thing, it's not unique to Stadia, but if they double down on things like this that are actually good from a user's experience and a unique strength of streaming, they could get some wins. And it does take a bit of a sting out of Stadia's, I'd say, absurd full price payment model and a subscription fee that doesn't really get you that much. Of course, that's especially if they're going to continue doing demos for major new releases like Immortals Phoenix Rising, which is, of course, a big new Ubisoft game. Now, another thing as well is a bit of a long-standing issue with the service, and that is a launch date disparities. And they've been doing a bit better now. I mean, getting big games but weeks or months after launch obviously doesn't cut it, especially for a fledgling platform, but of course, we do have games like Cyberpunk 2077 that are going to be day and date on Stadia. And certainly when you are trying to charge full price for a game, you need that. Because turns out 3 months after, the game is no longer worth its RRP in the eyes of most consumers. So that's the sort of thing that does just give you that sort of jump right in, future of cloud gaming. Sadly, though, Google don't seem to be trying to help themselves out too much here, and this is one of the most embarrassing things. The Chromecast with Google TV, which was released at the end of September, seems like a pretty good streaming product, right? I mean, I like Chromecast, it works pretty well. Doesn't support Stadia though, and it's not going to until 2021. Now, you still can sideload the Stadia app on it, but that's obviously not a good user experience. But here's what's really funny. That product is the official replacement for the Chromecast Ultra. The Chromecast Ultra is the thing that Stadia actually works on. So yes, that is the replacement for the Stadia recommended device, and it doesn't support Stadia when it comes out. How the hell did Google allow that to happen? I mean, I think it pretty obviously shows a lack of institutional just will or giving a damn about Stadia. If they truly wanted to push this, they would have ensured it would work on their new product. Absurd. And I'd further say that this is when everybody is ramping up for next gen. Microsoft, Sony, they're all making their big moves. So for Google to not really have much to meet that, and then to have this being in 2021, that's just embarrassing. And then there's other issues they've had, like, on iOS, there was a browser application that basically allowed Stadia to be ran in a browser. Apple pulled that, so that obviously limits their access a bit, which is not major, but is a bit of a ding against them. But overall here's the point. There's not that much happening with Stadia. It does not have a massive library. The demos are great though, but there are fundamental problems with their business model that still do exist. And many of the exciting features they actually touted on their announcement, they've not appeared yet. So basically, there's no killer feature. There's no killer innovation. Now, that innovation could be technological, and they may have killer tech, but they're not using it, I would say, in a way that's actually a killer user experience. So they don't have that. And then they've not innovated on business model, which basically means they're achieving nothing. And I think that is something that they can't afford to be doing when you actually look at the competition. Stadia really did have a significant head start in the mainstream cloud gaming space. I mean, when Stadia came out, you couldn't get xCloud, right? They were there. They were the people to go to. And they cocked it up. They just have not kept up. And when you go through the competition, it really is quite embarrassing, because now, instead of just competing with consoles and PCs with local gaming, there's now strong cloud competition. So Microsoft's xCloud is relatively new, but it already offers a better service than Stadia. And of course, it ties into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, and that means that for the price-ish of Stadia Pro, you get instant access to a humongous gaming library. Of course, that's a gaming library you can play locally, or you can play with streaming. That's for $15 a month. That absolutely clobbers the value proposition of Stadia Pro. And you know what? I think for a lot of people, even if they were only caring about demos, they'd be pretty happy to drop $15 and be able to instantly try just about anything. I think that really does beat even Stadia's situation, where it can have those pretty cool demos of new games. I mean, 4 months of Game Pass Ultimate, that costs the price of one full game in Stadia. This value proposition makes no sense, especially because one of the things Stadia was trying to do was to be super accessible and low cost of entry, because all you'd need is a screen that you could stream on. Not that they've even done a great job of doing that, of course, with the new Chromecast Ultra replacement not supporting Stadia. It's so embarrassing. And then, of course, with streaming, Microsoft also, I think they've got what Google don't. Ambition and action. I mean, Google technically have got ambition with, their 120 frames per second, 8K, but that's just words. It doesn't matter. I don't think it's that much in terms of ambition for a core user experience. Whereas what Microsoft are doing is they're trying to, across everything, give people an accessible, consumer-friendly service. xCloud is a key part of that. It just has, more. It's got more games. It's in more places. It ties into things you already want. Now, it currently is limited to Android devices, but there are plans to expand. It's going to be on iOS by 2021, and PC and consoles are priority down the line, with PC being the big priority. Now, basically, the plan there is to also, on top of that, use xCloud to offer game trials and demos. So it's just going to be everywhere. It's going to tie into everything that you're doing. And of course, it will also allow people to run true next-gen games on their Xbox One, because that will be usable as an xCloud streaming box. It just works. Then also, there's Amazon who are coming in. Of course, Amazon have got Twitch, where YouTube and Stadia have, of course, YouTube Gaming. Now, Amazon are doing something similar to xCloud, but with their own quirks. They're quirks that will make a lot of sense if you've ever used Amazon Prime. So it still is subscription-based, but it's got to focus on channels. And that's just like how, if I wanted to watch Counterpart on Amazon Prime, I have to get the Starz channel, because Starz are the network who do Counterpart. In the same way, you'll be able to subscribe to the Ubisoft channel of Luna. So that's basically how that's going to work, right? So it's like a sort of a series of Netflixes, right, within it. But that said, there is Luna Plus, which is their own one, and it's going to have a bunch of games as well. And then I'd also say, actually, with Ubisoft, Ubisoft are big in streaming. They're just going in everyone's streaming service. So you could buy Ubisoft games, or maybe play the demos or whatever, over on Stadia, but you could just subscribe to the Ubisoft channel and basically get all of their games in one package on Luna. For a lot of people, that's going to beat Stadia as well. Now, the situation right now is that Luna is invite-only, and it is in early access. The current library is about 50 games. The introductory pricing of Luna Plus is $5.99 a month. So it seems like it's not quite there, but basically it should be a better value proposition than Stadia. And then also a big win that they will have is that they in some ways will be more accessible than xCloud and Stadia at launch, where Luna is going to be on PC, Mac, Fire TV, and iOS, but not Android because, of course, competition. So yeah, that's what's up there. I mean, both Amazon and Microsoft, despite being newer in the streaming space in terms of actually launching products, are offering a stark contrast to Google's just lack of action. And the extent of Google's response has just been demos, a few more releases, and a relatively tame sale. It knocked $20 off the Premier Edition, and the console, or the controller even, went from $69 to $55. Not much major. And of course, the core of the Stadia business model doesn't work. It didn't work at the start, it doesn't work now. It's of basically no unique value to anyone, even though the tech is cool. I just don't believe that people want to buy a diminished quality, and that is how I view a cloud version of a game. It is diminished quality for obvious reasons. People don't want to buy that at full price, right? What people want is for this to be an add-on to their gaming experience. So Luna beats them in value, xCloud beats them on value, but also on integration, because xCloud is bundled into Game Pass, so technically speaking, you can get a game and you can run it local or streaming, no matter what. The value is just so much better. Stadia might have excellent technology, but there's no amount of 8K 120 Hz that's going to save them from having a terrible business model that offers no unique value to anyone. So, what they need to do is completely scrap their business model, and they need to try again. They've got cool tech, but right now, they are totally set up for failure. So there you go, that's the video. Google's inaction has actually been kind of insane. Stadia, right, it totally drifted out of the news. And when we went into this video, it was literally just, we kind of thought, what's up with Stadia? Then Alex, of course, made his statements, and we decided to dig more into Stadia and bring the video to fruition. And we were really surprised with how little they've done with Stadia, given that it's almost a year. I think November 16th or something is roughly their anniversary. I mean, maybe Google are happy with that. Maybe they know that Stadia actually just needs to lie low so that in a year or two, whenever, their big moves happen, their new features turn on, and their first-party games actually appear, that maybe that's when, they can make their big announcements, and that's kind of like Stadia Wave 2, and everyone gets excited. But even if that is their plan, while they're waiting, everyone else is just going to be beating them. Fundamentally, Strauss-Zelnick was right. If you don't know what I'm referencing, Strauss-Zelnick, of course, the head of Take-Two, he basically said, look, gamers are willing to buy consoles and buy games. It's what they want to do because they like playing games. And yes, even though it's Strauss who obviously presides over some things we do not like going on in the industry, he's right there. People are fine buying a console to play games on. I don't think they're really that interested in streaming that much generally. And I think where they are interested in streaming, it's something like xCloud, where it can be an additive part of an experience that they're already enjoying. So, that's it for this video. If you want to support us, you can check out all the cool loot on Patreon. And a final parting question. Are you using Stadia or xCloud or any of that? Are streaming services at all of interest to you? If so, well, do let me know. That's it for me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.